Welcome to the deep dive. We take complex sources and research and, well, we break them down to make you instantly well-informed on some pretty important topics.
And today, we are really getting into the theological engine behind a major modern Chinese Christian movement.
We're talking about the work of Zhao Tian'an, or He, and his incredibly influential threefold vision.
And really, the main thing for you to get from this is that Zhao's entire framework, all his theology, his mission strategy, it is all just laser focused on the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Right, that's the core.
It's the engine for everything else.
So our source for this is an article called The Theological Starting Point of the Threefold Vision. And it really unpacks his soteriology. That's his view on salvation, or so as he laid it all out in his training manual, Salvation Theology.
And you can see right away he's firmly rooted in Reformed and evangelical theology. He's all about the Bible major passages like John 13 to 17, Romans 5 to 8.
But it's not just academic.
No, not at all. He takes these big ideas and applies them directly to the real-world cultural habits you find in a Chinese context.
So here's what we're going to do for you. We're going to follow Zhao's logic. First, we have to understand his view on humanity, and his view on sin.
Because only when you get that foundation can you really feel the weight of why his Christ-centered view of salvation is, for him, an absolute necessity.
And why it's still so challenging to some cultural norms today.
Okay, so if we're looking at why Zhao even developed all this, his motivation, it wasn't really about winning arguments in the seminary.
Not an intellectual exercise.
No, his core purpose was what he called ammission, evangelism. His whole thing was training people, believers and non-believers alike, to understand and then communicate the heart of the gospel with, total clarity.
And if that's your goal, clear communication, you have to start at square one, right? You can't really talk about the cure until you've established how serious the disease is.
Exactly. So his salvation theology kicks off by making the case for the necessity, the urgency of salvation. He's answering that fundamental question. Why does anyone need to be saved at all?
And he begins with humanity, his who.
Yes, the classical view. Humans were made in God's image, completely distinct from all creation, with both a spirit and a body, made for relationship.
But the article points out he doesn't really dwell on that. He doesn't spend a lot of time on the glory of creation.
No, he pivots almost immediately to the fall. That's where he lays out the terminal diagnosis.
And what are the consequences?
According to Zhao, they were just catastrophic. He outlines three huge dramatic results from Adam's sin. First, a fundamental change in human nature. Our inner moral compass, it just breaks.
And second, and this is huge, the severance of the relationship between God and humanity.
The connection is cut. Just like that.
And the third one?
The third is a change in the entire universe, the earth itself. Sin messes with everything. So the end result of all that, for Zhao, is inescapable bondage.
Bondage and punishment.
Yes, the wages of sin is death, period.
I think that urgency is the key takeaway here, If you just see sin as a few mistakes, then Jesus is just, a helpful life coach.
Right.
But if sin is this terminal cosmic problem that infects your very nature, your relationship with God, and the world itself, then the gospel becomes an absolute necessity.
Exactly. The bad news has to be that bad for the good news to be that good.
So let's dig a bit deeper into sin itself. How does Zhao define it?
He defines it as violating God. So it's not just a flaw, it's a conscious act. It's knowing God's will and, choosing not to follow it. He uses Adam's choice as the original blueprint for that.
Okay, and that brings us to a really theological, but, as the article says, a crucial concept from Reformed thought.
The transmission of sin, or imputation.
Imputation. Okay, let's break that down. For someone listening who isn't deep into theology, how do we explain this idea of a legal transfer?
The best way to think about it is that Adam wasn't just one guy. He was acting as a corporate representative for everyone who would ever come after him.
So like the CEO of humanity.
Kind of, yeah. When he sinned, he incurred a corporate debt on behalf of the entire human race. So his sin and all those consequences we just talked about are imputed. They're legally transferred to everyone.
It's a legal debt transfer based on that representative idea, which he gets from Romans 5.12. But you can already hear the modern objection, can't you? How is it fair that I get penalized for what some distant ancestor did?
And that's the exact question he knew he had to answer for evangelism. He makes a slight distinction from, say, Augustine's view of original sin, which is more like you literally inherit a corrupt substance.
So what's Zhao's emphasis then?
Zhao's focus is more legal. He stresses that we bear the consequence of death not just because of Adam's one act, but because all of us, like Adam, end up violating God ourselves. Adam's acts set the precedent and the penalty death, and then our own actions confirm that we deserve that judgment.
Ah, okay. That closes the blame Adam loophole.
It does. The message isn't you're guilty because of him. It's more like he was your representative in failure, and you've confirmed his failure in your own life, which proves you need an external rescue.
That clarity feels really important for actually sharing this message.
Vital. It establishes that the problem is deep, and the penalty isn't just arbitrary.
Okay, so we've got Zhao's starting point locked in. Now, the article does something really interesting here. It offers a kind of supplement.
Right, and we need to be really clear. This next part comes from the article's author, Ying Shan. It's not Zhao's core argument. It's more like a modern bridge to help us grasp the helplessness of the human condition.
A philosophical connection for today's world.
Exactly. The author brings in the theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, who looks at sin from an existential angle. He links it directly to human anxiety.
Anxiety that comes from our basic contradiction, right? We have a finite, limited body, but we also have this transcendent spirit that wants more, that wants the infinite.
We're caught in the middle. And that tension, that's what Niebuhr calls anxiety. And he says anxiety itself isn't sin, but it's the precondition. It's the emotional fuel.
Because to escape that anxiety, we try to make ourselves infinite. We try to solve our own finitude.
And that attempt is sin. Specifically, he calls it pride. We try to take God's place to soothe our own insecurity.
And the article lays out Niebuhr's 4 types of pride. The first is pretty straightforward. Pride of power.
Yes, seeking control over everything and everyone because we feel insecure inside. Then there's pride of knowledge.
Which is when we treat our own limited perspective as if it's the absolute capital T truth.
And then maybe the most common one today, self-righteous pride, making yourself the moral center of the universe. If I do it, it must be right.
And all of that can lead to the final and maybe most dangerous form, spiritual pride.
Right, where you take your own religious standards and basically equate them with God's. And then, of course, you judge everyone else by that standard.
So the value of bringing in Niebuhr here is that it gives us a modern psychological language for the same conclusion Zhao reached theologically.
Exactly. Whether you call it theological debt or existential pride, the result is the same. Humans are helpless. We can't fix this ourselves.
Which means salvation has to come from the outside.
And that brings us right back to the core of Zhao's message. Since we can't solve the sin problem on our own, salvation has to come through Jesus Christ. This is the absolute cornerstone of his whole vision.
And Zhao would say this wasn't some plan B, right?
No, God's redemptive plan started right after the fall. The whole Old Testament is setting the stage, building the expectation of a Redeemer who would eventually come.
And for Zhao, Christ's work had 2 key purposes. First, to reveal the Father.
And second, and this is the most critical part, to complete the work of salvation on the cross, to be the one perfect, final atonement sacrifice.
So let's talk about the mechanics of that atonement, especially from Romans 8.3. What exactly did Christ accomplish?
Zhao really emphasizes that Christ came in the likeness of sinful flesh, but he himself was sinless. That's a vital distinction. He entered our broken system, but without the internal flaw.
So he wasn't just a good example.
No, he was performing an objective action. He took the legal and spiritual debt of humanity onto himself.
He changed the cosmic balance sheet.
That's a great way to put it. Zhao's summary is basically this. Christ's death pays the cost of sin in full. It satisfies God's justice. The debt is settled. It's done, completely outside of us.
So how do we get the benefit of that payment?
Through faith. By faith, we are united with Christ. When he died, we died with him. When he rose, we rose with him. So his perfection is, well, there's that word again, it's imputed to us.
Transferred to our account.
Exactly. We are forgiven and accepted by God as if we'd never sinned, but only because of what Christ did for us.
Which means salvation is received only through faith. Sad, yay. And the article stresses that even this faith isn't something we work up. It's a gift of God's grace.
Absolutely crucial. It's not earned. And Zhao was insistent that this faith can't just be some vague positive thinking. The object of the faith has to be Jesus Christ specifically, as God's Son, as Redeemer, and as a returning King.
That Christ-centered part is non-negotiable. The focus is always on the giver, not our effort in receiving.
Okay, so understanding that salvation is a free gift, received by faith alone. That sounds simple enough in theory,
But this is where Zhao's most practical, most culturally specific insight comes in. He noticed that this very idea of free grace is really, really difficult for many Chinese people to accept because of certain ingrained cultural habits.
This is where the rubber meets the road. He saw this deep, deep tendency towards pragmatism and utilitarianism.
You see it in a lot of traditional folk religions, right? It's transactional. You do the rituals, you give the offering, you get a good result.
It's a very practical, what's in it for me view of the divine. And the great danger Zhao saw was that people unconsciously bring that same framework with them when they first encounter Christianity.
So instead of seeing Christ as the unique solution to the sin problem,
They see him as just a more effective deity,
yeah,
AV, a more powerful God to go to for help.
and faith becomes a formula.
Yes. Diligent prayer, going to church, doing good deeds, they all become things you do to get a better life, to get your kids into a good school, to solve your problems.
Which is the total opposite of grace. It turns an unearned gift back into a transaction. If I think I'm earning my blessings, I haven't actually understood the core of the gospel at all.
And Zhao argued that for the gospel to truly change someone, they have to move past that. They have to realize that Christ is the goal in and of himself for the forgiveness of sins, not just a tool to get other things.
And that's a huge shift.
It's the biggest cultural hurdle to overcome. It means giving up the idea that your own effort, your hard work, your moral achievements can earn you favor with God.
So let's distill all this. What have we unpacked in this deep dive? Zhao Tian'en's soteriology, built for evangelism, follows this really clear logical path.
It starts with the depth of human sin and helplessness. That establishes the absolute necessity of salvation.
Then that salvation is accomplished only by Christ's objective work on the cross. It's a finished work.
And finally, it's received only by faith, which means we have to let go of that cultural impulse to earn it or barter for it.
It's an incredibly consistent model. You have to start with the gravity of the problem to really appreciate the power of the solution.
And that clarity is what makes it so powerful.
The knowledge we've gone through here gives you so much context for understanding these movements. So if true faith, like Zhao laid it out, means you have to give up the comfort of self-effort, if you have to discard that utilitarian bargaining, that idea that you must do something to get something. What deep-seated habits, personal or cultural, might you need to confront to truly embrace grace as a totally free gift? That's something for you to think about long after this deep dive is over.